Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Oakcast, your island gateway to all things geek. I'm your host tonight, Calum MacDhòmhnail, and well, you know this man above me on the screen, Faunch. You know that there's languages of Gaelic afoot when he's on, so give me a hashi, Faunch.
Gyma, dim yn haw hein.
How you greva. So tonight is just in advance. Half of this show will be done in English, and the second half will be done on Gaelic. So tonight, very special guest, language educator. We became famous on YouTube amongst the Gaelic community, also through doing Gaelic through a bit of a different method than what we're used to, and also using geek material. So please welcome to the show from Jason, Gaelic with Jason. Yep, that's the name of the chat. Jason Bond. Fescar Falchig.
Modern time, yeah.
So I think the obvious question probably, I know when I mentioned this to my parents and all that, obviously you're American, so how on earth did you discover Gaelic, and what was that light bulb moment where you decided I want to learn this language?
This is the question that always gets me a free pint in the pub every single time, because everyone asks, how are you enjoying your holiday? And I used to say, I'll tell you in October when we have school holidays, But it's a long and winding road, one completely unexpected. I first came in touch with, I guess, more Scottish history through pretty broad doors, so to speak. Like, I love Braveheart in high school. I mean, it is a start. It is a very fanciful start, but there's something there that maybe kind of catches your interest and draws you deeper. So I've always been interested in history, and especially Scotland and Ireland. And something in Braveheart was just like so fascinating, such a good story. And I wanted to learn more. And that's when I started to investigate more. That's when I found that there is actually the Gaelic language. Came across Runrig on YouTube, the early days of YouTube. I just remember being blown away, like, this is amazing. I love trad music, Irish and Scottish trad. But to hear the song was a whole nother level and something very special. And that, I feel, it touched something deeper in me. Although, to be honest, these days I feel awakened, whatever the stupid English word is, something woke up in me. And I definitely feel that these days, that there was something just deep in me that wanted to wake up to this culture, this language. And so I just came across Runrig. I loved it, listened to more Runrig. And then when I decided to go for university studies, I wanted to study Scottish and Irish, essentially Gaelic literature and culture and history. And I was aiming to be a professor, interested in the language, but I was more interested in the academia side. And part of my studies was taking a year of either Scottish or Irish Gaelic. And because I was in Nova Scotia, I thought Scottish Gaelic would allow me to really connect with the locals and the local area, the local history. Oh boy, did it ever. And our teacher, she would sing to us and just tell us these little anecdotes. She's from Lewis herself, she is. And she just have these wonderful little bits and pieces to share with us from a Gael. And I just, more. I had to have more Gaelic. So I kind of shifted my focus to language. Took every single course I could, every single history course. We had film series in the Celtic department there, Welsh films as well. We watched Shach, which was amazing because it combined two of my favorite things, stories, and then like the Gaelic in the landscape too. So I just fell very, very deeply in love with Gaelic, and something awoke in me. I needed more. I'm going to do more. There was no question that this was something important to my life that I was going to follow. And I just, got stuck in and didn't let go, and I still haven't let go. That's the short answer.
Right. Found you coming in there. Sorry.
I'm wondering, because we're soon going to get talking a bit more in more detail about your work, on your YouTube channel and Gaelic for Geeks and all that. And I was wondering, because you're talking about Braveheart and these sort of things, it's kind of a lot of learners, I notice, you have a way in, right? It will be music for some, it will be like TV or something for others. Do your love of fantasy, because I notice you seem to like The Witcher a lot, and I assume you like other things than The Witcher. Does your love of fantasy and your love of Gaelic, do they relate to each other? And did fantasy and stories, as you were just mentioning, did they have an impact on your own learning process?
Absolutely. Stories are really what kept me going, because if anyone who's learned Gaelic, analyzing it and trying to get the mind around lenition and everything like that. It can be very hard going. And if you're not minded like that, it can be just soul destroying sometimes. It can be just, you want it so bad and it just feels so out of reach because it's so foreign, because you're rewiring your brain. That's how it felt for me. I was rewiring my brain for a completely different perspective, for the Celtic perspective on life and way of expression. So for me, stories really kept my alive, like really kept that fire going. I love all those old stories about like Kelpies and the Urishk and all these critters and all these things going on in the world that just made it feel more than just, I don't know, paying bills and buying petrol and going to the grocery store. I love folklore. I love mythology. And once I got to a point where I could use those kinds of stories in an adapted form to boost my own Gaelic, things took off even more. And that definitely informed my own teaching and just how good a story can be as a learning resource and how compelling a story can be, even if we have no interest in a Kelpie, right? In a water horse or something like that. I bet you someone would sit down and kind of listen and think, I want to know how this ends. Maybe they might not care terribly afterwards, but I think we all want to hear stories. And if we can use stories to learn Gaelic more enjoyably, more smoothly, more deeply, I'm all for it. Yeah.
That's kind of a neat transition into talking a bit about your work then, because so you have a YouTube channel, Gaelic with Jason. People can go check it out. And in it, one of your approach is, you're not telling people, okay, today we learn to say ha, mi, guma, or whatever. You actually tell a story, right? And one of the things I noticed in many of your videos, you either use a witcher, which is quite interesting in itself because it's, Slavic mythology and everything. So you're like kind of freely just going for this series you love. And others you use traditional stories. For instance, you had an episode around Samhain that approach, like Halloween, for people who don't know. That approach is a traditional tale around it. What made you decide when you created your channel and you wanted to share this love of Gaelic? What made you decide to go for that method rather than more traditional approaches to teaching?
Excellent. I could talk for hours on this.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
it's
we invited
That's
you
what
to
we're here
talk.
for.
So
when I trained after I did my Celtic Studies degree, I wanted to keep going with Gaelic and I wanted to share it with others. I really loved it. I wanted other people to really love it, to like wake up to the importance of this language, to the beauty in it, to how it made life much richer. So I did train as a teacher. I did a 2-year teaching degree in Nova Scotia as well. And I did my practice teaching in pretty traditional areas, and that was fine. It was good practice, good learning. And that's what I did when I got my first teaching job on the Isle of Islay. So I was teaching in the high school there, teaching both Gaelic as a foreign language in a way, and then also Gaelic medium. And I was going with, what others recommended and what others were doing. And that was okay. It was similar to what I had learned myself. So, it's familiar to a degree. And it seems like the need is always, how can I make this more fun? And I'm thinking about it, and to some folk, yeah, you know, analysis and categorization and just getting into the mechanics of language is fun, and it's become fun for me. It wasn't to begin with, to be honest. It was a big struggle, and I almost gave up and learned Icelandic instead because I thought it'd be easier. Glad I didn't. Glad I didn't. That was my first year with Gaelic. Like, what have I gotten into? So I switched to. I was looking at different teaching methodologies. And I came across TPR, which is total physical response. It's kind of like Simon Says, right? It would be an activity usually, but then as a methodology, piqued my interest. And then there's a way of telling stories in just animated ways, having a sort of sign language in a way to make sure everything is being clear, having chants, and then it just grew from what this storytelling method could be, involving the students too. You're not telling them the story, they're helping create it, create characters, locations, things that they find fun. And usually stories are pretty darn wacky. One of my best stories I remember was with my S1 class. It was the really young ones, first starting out in high school. And we had a character who was a spider named Teeny Tone, and he lived in a lemon. And the big struggle of his life is he wanted to move to a new house, so ended up moving to a slightly bigger lemon. I mean, wacky story, kind of funny. Maybe it's not great literature, but it was fun. It was darn fun, and it was involving everyone. Of course, S1 senses of humor, it's always kind of delightful because they love to play and I get creative. So I found creating stories with my classes engage them in ways that I wish I had engaged with. In language study previously, I learned German, I learned a bit of French, through school. I lived in Germany and I learned basically just by being there as well. So there was this level of engagement through story that I loved. And also for me as a teacher, this felt so authentic because I love the stories myself. I love being creative, being wacky, kind of playful with the language, having fun and laughing, and not just at ourselves because, oh, I forgot Lenischen again, or oh, that's a feminine noun. That's right, because it ends in ag. Oh, well, maybe I'll get it next time. But like using the language to create humor, to create genuine, heartfelt experience and connective experience with others. Like we made this story together, and we can read it, and you can probably tell it to someone else after a bit of practicing and a bit of reading it through it again to remind yourself. So to me, it followed the principles of accelerated learning, which is a methodology in itself. And my students were using Gaelic. My young ones were really, they were very keen. I remember in the co-op going, pick up my vegetables, after school, just getting some things for dinner. One of my students comes over and speaks a little Gaelic to me. I mean, nothing earth-shaking. It's not reciting poetry, but it was an authentic expression. They wanted to communicate with me and they wanted to do it in Gaelic. And that is priceless. That is exactly what I feel the Gaelic community needs, is young people, especially, who want to use it to express themselves. And so I find the storytelling method is so powerful in that way because you do incorporate others' voices. And in my channel, it's just me talking to the camera. So there's only so much, connection with others or ideas from others one can bring in. But even then, I'm kind of having just fun with myself, just enjoying the story and seeing where it goes and drawing the pictures and, treating it like a big comic book and just enjoying a bit of Gaelic, and whoever's along for the ride is along for the ride too, and just having fun with it and making it clear so that even if you're not, 100%, invested in this story, you're gaining something. Even my students who really didn't care much about Gaelic, they could ask for, like a brand great game in Gaelic. They could still use it.
Yeah, I suppose it's just interesting what you say, because that's what, when I spoke to you a few months ago, was it, when I interviewed, what you were saying about role playing games? That's like pretty much the function you're having there, isn't it?
I definitely, it's like, we're like talking a bit just before the show started to be recorded about, how there is that need for interaction, for deeper connection, but also for people who start being able to actually converse in Gaelic to get to the next level. And I noticed with friends a few years back, we started playing, Dungeons and Dragons in Gaelic. And the first few sessions are a bit wacky because they're like, oh, how the heck do I say, okay, I swing my sword at the goblin?
Mhm.
But once you get the words and all that, you start creating more complex things, and you start actually, you do things that you would never do in Gaelic, probably in real life, like, a heist or whatever. You have to like prepare a heist in Gaelic. And it's a sort of thing that actually, beyond knowing the vocabulary, it gets you to use the language in a new context. And I guess that's the thing, we're talking about TV and stuff like that. When you have a language like English or French, you get this exposure, right? You're exposed to Ocean 11, or you're exposed to Braveheart. You're exposed to all that stuff. So kids who have never worn a chainmail in their life still know what a chainmail is. They've never set foot in a spaceship, but they know what a spaceship is. But in an endangered language like Gaelic, you don't have all this context, this external context that traditionally stories would tell you, right? Many elders that you talk to, they've never held a sword in their life, but they will tell you about Fionn McCool. And to tell you about Fionn McCool, they need to have the vocabulary for weaponry and medieval equipment and siege weapons and these sort of things. They don't have it much these days anymore. But it's the stories have this power to also bring you beyond your daily life. And definitely role-playing games is that, but storytelling in a traditional setting is as well, definitely. I noticed, is there a question in the chat?
Yeah, there's a comment that's you seen it on the screen
right.
there.
So what is it? Since you teach Gaelic through The Witcher, I was wondering how much you know about Slavic mythology itself. Do you have a favorite myth or story from it? Well, let's go for that.
Sure. And actually, can I just comment really quick on what you just said, Frank? I agree that role-playing games, while not maybe some of the terminology is not immediately useful to our daily lives, it still gives us useful things. And I would say that we can always everything is transferable in a story. Maybe not some of the fine details, the story details, specific terminology, but there are absolutely things we can bring into everyday conversation. And that's, I feel, a really powerful part of stories, the high frequency element to it. All right, Slavic mythology. I'm afraid I don't know much about Slavic mythology except what I've heard of or experienced through The Witcher. I do have a student, one of my regular students lives in Prague, and for a while we were talking about folkloric creatures. So I'm a big fan of Urishks. For some reason, I just think they're so cool. So, found some Urishk stories and Kelpie stories and saying them to her. And then she wrote up some stories about the Votnik, about this kind of water spirit, kind of like an Urishkin itself. A little fellow who's dressed in old time clothes, with a fishing rod, a pipe, and that kind of thing. So my knowledge of Slavic mythology is minimal. Usually, it's pretty much from The Witcher and then the Votnik as well. But I'm always open to a good story. I love learning stories from other cultures, especially cultures I'm not very familiar with, because then it's just this fresh perspective that you gain. I really love that. One of the best, actually, one of the best horror stories I read. I don't know if they would be considered Slavic, but it was a Transylvanian horror story. It was a vampire story, but it was also a werewolf story at the same time. And there was this forest creature who became this man's wife, and she looked completely human, and she was very strong and very capable. But there were certain things he wasn't allowed to do. Of course, it happens, and then it turns out that she's like robbing the graves of people as a wolf and like eating parts of things. Like, I thought that's a whole nother level of werewolves that's very interesting, and there's kind of a vampiric element to it too. So please, if you have recommendations for new stories, let me know.
I was quite curious because you've taught Gaelic in Scotland and you've now taught it abroad. Is there a different challenge like towards a Gaelic learner and like a foreign learner? Is there different challenges in teaching there?
Is there a different challenge? Yes, I would say that the Scots, even Scots who are not in Gaelic speaking areas, they've still heard the sounds enough through their English, through different elements of being in Scotland, different ways of being in Scotland. They have a lot of the sounds, kind of the concepts. Whereas a learner like myself, I had to start with square one and learn some of these sounds before I could even hear them within words. So I feel that folks in Scotland, especially Scots who are raised in Scotland, they do have a bit of an edge for the sound, even though they may never have spoken Gaelic a word in their life. They've heard things that are useful, within Scottish English and Scottish words that have come from Gaelic into the Scottish English too. Yeah, yeah, I think that's a very helpful edge or just kind of a starting point for a learner. Also, Scottish learners tend to have more resources locally. Us foreign learners, we got to go online, and it's so isolating. It's such a lonesome thing sometimes. Yeah,
That leads into what I was going to ask you next. Like for these isolated foreign learners, like just say like that person in Prague that you mentioned, like what advice would you give to someone? Like if you could just, for learning a language on your own when you don't really have access to native
mm,
speakers.
mm, mm. What you're doing is very challenging. So you're very courageous. You're very brave, and you'll do it. You'll get there. Just because you're not in Scotland doesn't mean you can't do it. Just because no one around you speaks Gaelic doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you have to be a little creative. You have to be more, I think, driven. You have to really motivate yourself more because your environment is not offering you what others might have. And that's okay. In some ways, being kind of out of the Gaelic world, I feel offers a benefit in that maybe we see it more widely. Maybe we don't gain, I don't know, maybe we don't gain some biases. We don't take up some biases or conditioning. I don't know if conditioning is the right word, but we can come at it with a completely fresh, open mind. And it takes time to fill that mind with Gaelic. But maybe there are certain aspects that we can appreciate because we're outsiders. Um, and of course, we can learn to appreciate things from insiders, and maybe I think we will become insiders. So don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. You can do it. It's might be a lifetime journey, and it's one that's going to make your life much richer.
Because I think for like the a challenge that some Scottish learners will be And I think you've encountered this yourself as this internal Scottish, there's some negativity towards Gaelic. Like you've said yourself, you've had people say direct to your face, it should die. Like,
Oh,
how, so what's the advice you would give to a learner, like when they're maybe getting that from their social circle? Like, why are you doing
Mhm.
that? That useless language should die out. Like, what would be your advice for someone who's taken it up? Or even
Mm,
just for someone who has that mindset, is there any words you would, well, polite words you would say to maybe
light
change their
words.
mind, not the other kind of words?
Got some words for you there, don't I? Yeah, to someone who's encountering that, it really can be disheartening and kind of heartbreaking in a way, even though we may not want to admit that. And it's okay because everyone's going to have their own opinion. I feel that doing something that's worth doing in our lives is worth doing. It's learning Gaelic, taking up Gaelic, deepening your fluency, connecting to something in it that just makes your soul sing or just really makes you just so happy is absolutely worth it. It doesn't matter that it might doesn't make you a millionaire. It doesn't matter that it doesn't get you a big fancy house. There's so much more to life than our basic needs. We need them, but a life without things that are more than that is really it's flat. And Gaelic adds the sense of I say the word magic because that's what it is for me, but the sense of magic, beauty, perspective, a way of seeing the world that just makes life so much richer and more enjoyable. So others will have their own opinions, absolutely, and that's up to them. They might change that, they might not, but really connect with what it means to you, and don't let go of that. Don't ever let go of that. Don't let anyone take that away from you, even though it might feel like the wiser thing to do is to give up. Don't. To folk who have those opinions, I get it, like there's a lot of pressure in life. There's a lot of need for security and comfort and low stress. And taking on something that is kind of wacky and out there and maybe seems like this weird ancient thing that doesn't have relevance to today, I get that can feel weird and we don't want to necessarily look weird to others. Yeah, I get that. And if it's not your cup of tea, it's not your cup of tea. That's fine. But don't ruin it for others because it means the world to a lot of people. And the world is a better place because we're all in it and because Gaelic is in it. That's my 2 cents.
I don't know. It makes for a full pound, I'd say, at this stage. But yeah, no, it is quite interesting, and it is. I do agree. It's like I always say to people when they're starting with Gaelic and they don't really know how far they want to go, because some people they just want to dabble. They're not interested in going far.
Mhm.
I always tell people, no matter what language you learn, you will not regret it if you follow on that path. Nobody has learned a language to a good level and thought, I just shouldn't have. You know, I learned German fluently. I've been talking to Germans, and actually, I shouldn't have. Nobody ever says that, right? And I know that, for me, it's this kind of moments. One of the anecdote in my journey that definitely counts as like, yeah, this is exactly why I'm here for. Is I remember doing some field work in Scalpe, collecting place names and things like that. And all of a sudden, this elder starts. I don't remember what prompted it, but it starts to teach me a spell to cure your cattle of the evil eye, right?
Cool.
Magic. He's like, no, this is how you have to perform it. So he's like explaining to me every single step of that magic spell. And I was sitting there like, this is the coolest thing ever. I have
Yeah.
like a Gael teaching me magic. And then I left his house and I went to like one of the neighbors to do the same thing, collect place names. And all of a sudden that neighbor is like, but there is that spell against the evil eye. And here he goes teaching to me the spell and talking about how he saw it perform as a child. And at this moment where, you're sitting there and you're like, yeah, I learned Gaelic for many reasons, but this is it. This is the coolest thing ever. And if I didn't speak Gaelic, I wouldn't be sitting here with two different elders teaching me magic right now. And ultimately, that's what it's about. And anecdotes like that, when you learn a language, you will have by the bucket, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I find particularly when you're learning an endangered language, because people will connect to you differently, because they see value in what you're doing in a different fashion, you get even more of these things because people want to connect. If you learn French people will be happy about it. They will talk to you, but they assume that, yeah, sure, you're learning French. Like, a third of a billion people speak French, so you're learning French. What's a big deal? They might not go into that deep connection, but a native Gaelic speaker that has a learner come in and speak to them in Gaelic will want to engage way more. And you end up having these amazing experiences that you would never have had otherwise. So it's, yeah, you'll never regret it. That's for sure.
I second that for sure. And for me, I remember when I started being able to read maps, so like Google Maps,
Oh, why?
reading
Oh,
the
why?
Gaelic place names, all of a sudden everything opens up like, wait a minute, there's a story with those mountains. There's what's going on there. And it's just this richness. You connect with the land in a completely different way by having the language that was spoken on it. It's just, I think it's just this beautiful way to show respect to a culture, to a people, to an area, and then connect with it in a way that goes beyond the superficial. Yeah, it adds so much. Just I keep saying magic, for me that's what it is. It's like deep connection, that special connection that changes your life.
Okay, yep. And I
Definitely.
think that's on a good note to let everyone know the English section's just coming to, we're halfway there. So, Inish, Brina Gaelic or Pounch, the Gyuri Wako.
Ai, go tíir a hain bhfuil so bis sin dó go Gaelican is agus a siad rút a bheith mír seán faineach rút a thuh mar an bíag áit sin na Gaelic an dúní me dói háí siúla bhí brin mun go a Braveheart is sacid agus chanel Gaelic count nuair a cha ilmug charúin na nás mar an bíag go bhí cuacán an eile tíireach bearla. A cha Gaelic ar a bhí sin isteach go rút an móra is ha Outlander go dé a héin ha Gaelic go leran. Ach go teoch ha Gaelic ri clunsin an filmmission mar Centurion le Michael Fassbender agus The Eagle kuchoch man goorsteits sin na clunich a ví se bring a Gaelic an. Ach ha fast karan averstoch an is de reune ha filmuk an an albe go sáiste ru den echkriol vai an Outlaw King is ru de machine kuchoch. Ha Gaelic an noch an daríru gaan chan li dunnen cho ker sa burren. A cha jaun agus ha soliers go de Gaelic a hinch. Smar sin va mi wondregug ha velu gin veach go vel sin toch boai is chan idach iva na Gaelic ach kuchoch an wok jonsoch a ha heen er vi check is steune mar sin. Sin an dace sin a ha Gaelic is ötin as an doel fobloch mar a heduk iad a verla in the public eye.
Apper céiste hána sin. Finine mí ra namheach sé rúd léfa a hán go bhfuil a nochgur an sa thula chaneal chula cáil ach an mór an seo agus an an dóid ha a jeirmh go é rút príseo a hán sa gáil go bhfuil airí ar ire cho ást sa hiic canan an éile agus namheach sé bu a hána sin gon check. Agus stocha go bhfuil tuileadh chorman ann do lucht Jonesachi a bhí a cléintin tíoch bican, tíoch appers nó fachglan a smaintin, ruair hen hiic mi sin, Jéhán a sin le. Stocha go bhfuil fachglan ga ann a tu sin agus sé brut mór a hána sin, sé bu a hána sin cuteach an bheach. Agus son sinna bhí a tachirst le filmin nó programmen amach as a thula stú Jonesachi a hacin, sé rút mór a hána sin an bheach. sé rút lochmór a hána go é rút príseach a hán sa Gaelic. Go bhfuil Jonesachi go bhfuil iad san airí ar chorman a bhí tíreach cimime charige sin. Had mi sin sa dé. Ach had airí ar chorman éile a bhí a cléintin na Gaelic agus an dóin gomáide flichte. sé rút mór a hána sin.
San as mó sin an dóchas go nachcrúten daléhiid a ha as a chiad dul amach as a rélig. Is mar a bh héine grain ha néach gan na senachchas na féine agus rúíoch chuchul in heid go berstoch a hug fantas ochis. So bhearcha a bhfuilús muide éhhéin na rutan sin, a bhfuilús muide chin go bhfuil áte hán hásan sur na Gaelicas an rutan mar sin is an bhá sa bhí is dúna go ma haidin bheach an bachor Gaelic a bhí mar a héad có amsíidir. Á féimi Gaelic a bhí ar an telí agus an sin nach.
Aye.
Did ó bheach ar áte na néachcan sin an sur na Gaelic héin, do rúna go bhfuil.
Chanéin gur é achte go má bearstoch a hán gunna Gaelic. Imig fachgo ishke son a holocaí émas tú son scíalachgan, sean scíalachgan, claiúin a holastú, scia, claiú, slug. Ha bearstes ag Gaelic gus jo scíalach inse, jo néach inse san dóise. Agus stocha nach bí sin a brín slugin a claiúin san lá an dúcho trich. Ach sé had go má cutramach ja na sean scéalaching agus na beachsa. Féimi a holadúne go harit na héikri. Féimi a bhí a gionsachuid na scéalachgan ach go hen. Maar a jonsich sinne ans na stachtjen, Robin Hood. Agus scéalachgan a bheith Disney, a Brian Disney san dóach gusa. Ach féimi na scéalachgan géalach na néachgan géalach a bhí ik a holadúne am bheach go harit ik na héikri. Agus bhíon go má tálaiste leorichin ure eichcín an scríbheh le scríbhchen óca an sás an an súl fantasach, súl Comic-Con. Had go má jóolach na scíalachcin na téimichin a thula cáil a hansan súlseo agus gan toirst go súl na Gaelic agus chud Gaelic scíalachcin a scríbhat hain. Bhíon go má tálaiste sin léomh an checkers an bí. Chaneal na leorichin sin acham go míarstanach ach bí agus ha mín dochas gun noch tuliag is tuliag. Go jeru scríb mí 3 novelin go réice seo ach chané monéachgan a hánta sé scíalachgan a bíala mar cadún an bháin agus dúirte is agus go má spórsal a bhí gan scríbh agus tíirech a clich leis na fachglin agus cimar a níú sealaigh. Cimar a bhís na scíalachgan seo a cumal bio agus cimar a níú sin le fachglin siimplí. Chané rút furasta a hán ítar a cha cóiste grim a bhí gan ddíanamh agus cruteoch betalam scíalachgan bile a scríbhad, scíalachgan ó mín sin. Well, chaníint mí a thulaáil, chaine mé gí spoilers a thuirtí. Betalam scíalach ecolach a scríbhad le iach uisce a tín na sascas. Agus ha buai mhór ag bíal aris ormsa agus ha mé farachcin go bhfuil scíalachcin bunla scríbhí mí novelin mar sin an san dói acham hín go má fascailte do luchtúin sa chi agus a mí dochas siimplí go leor gona bhí a scríbheh néach caran dhéanapach.
Tuki mé.
A bhí gan léomh gun strí. So hí sin plana a hacam go dearú. Urinnen bí mé checkas clasichin a staurig agus ní sin an unlik de hiú YouTube ach ní sin scíalachcin cóla. Hat tú dhéint mí scíalach a il aris haast ach mis minnig go ré trófiach go hána sin kan checkú. Ní mé sin kan checkú. Stálim a bhí a mesk nan álanach díoch a gáil tlach an sa Gaelic agus son na holadúne a bhí a farach gain go bhfuil sarvacha, ans an dói ha freckerach raibse. Agus. Butalm barach a horst stiach gan na klassischen akam biolarisch agus na shalm skielachken. Finla ni mission. Ja, ja. I dirach meervelach vi a goper le allenich falar vi onen shomar konlar agus a vi a farach gen dirach vi a farach gen misneach a fas agus dirach ik jirig en ma jirig na shachken ja vi het sé had die achterige moor houden.
Channéidir an alp an anésin as a Britain Vic at sin marsút. Ha dune smunjachin a chanen mar roet fallé. Feuti dunne vi tokkel kanen gunne vi een noch ui son doolachus. No vi noch Dit a ver hé na heuf sin na heuf ha mi tuk sin gewell gin werk well an doolachus go ma kutremochach. Ma sin as sons kum bi wok jonsachi gebé dunne gewell Gaelics an Charloch no nach heel. Ma sin as sons kum bi dun togol an doolachus aris. Agus na déf sin Channé jidoch le grames agus fachkel ach le a hule roet a ha a va agus a vies Gaelic a gjoen. Kimmer a bor an runne vi Janusok.
Love ik. Wow. Agus sé lut a hawn a vi a maach as a chuirsneach gojoch agus a vi is minnig doelgus a hokal. Gojoch. Skas nach I géle hanamse. Nam viach a mi gema koltach ri Aragorn on an Lord of the Rings. Han je elf a hawn ach but bi maar charich geid. Agus nam viach kan je géle hanam ach a mi dochus good jo charich a hanam vi se gojoch.
Amen.
Agus hij karan daar a vi is minnig sin maar Americanach. Ach ik een aan. Sé rut prísal a hawn en doelgus, agus sé rut gema kutelmach a hawn. Maar a hoorst u hen, no de brenestúri geel, agus ha de gientje kies, huket, agus, sé rut mór a hawn a sin, ach, chan je rut kumment a hawn a sin. Agus, kimmer a ní sin gan vorchuch. Sé keist gema ma mór a hawn a sin kujoch. Mar a simpler varach oran agus, neoch go ha cool of oran. Kimmer a ní sin ceall et luchtjónsachi agus cultar na Gaelic. An an dói ha freckerach agus jiúlin. Ich ha nébut ma fyrsta a hawn ach agus fémi tú canan go leor a vi giroch. Toch nach frekkers akam giroch kisten ewa ach. Sé jo rut a hawn agus minnig gegeris.
Well sin nach hannes het an Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy nach éis. Rud ha kutrmoch an je an rekker sé je héist tjaars de haun.
Check.
Na dune wie se jonschen a Gaelic kutjerut. Ha mi an doel gevel. Dicho joloch sa heid, nor a wie se de chin hoeket. Dicho joloch sa heid dooloches nan geo. Ha mi an doel gembik ma a garach o reis ko a haun nach. John dava hachke hele chagron.
Fim mi ranach el vor goed. Ai, maar saist ha girach toshok. Agus ha te genu came agus came eile sli in Gaelic ach. Mimi ma yichel a vi bruin kusper en kulturach agus a vi a tokal kjal, gervik. Maar sin ach. An lucht toshiki. Nam viach sé rut ma doelen noch a hawn a vi a tokal en kjal sin. Ounce Gaelic hen. So vierle, brinishin a holaka. Ach, femi sin gorish and femi sin videoin agus, piece an yevi aha Skimpig go leor don luchtjonsochi a bhí a léver gun strí. Agus, sé commas a hána sin, a ní first a hána sin a bhí a ddíanú stú mar seo. Ach mar is sé Outlander an ceall a haachcha rí sé Gaelic agus rí cultúr na Gaelic agus sé, sé tá í ann.
Oh, nas mi sé. Agus
Sé
jaachríich na Gaeltach mar sin chunne mí fatan as mis na siút agus bheith soliút go roiad cuit bransach í an eachríal so me ha dúne tín thucam is ha uach an Outlander a mis mun chin óráid sé bunat me go le a hasisiir sena bhí toléid agus a dána sáte.
Gojeru. Stocha go é stocha go é timpplaí a hán, bí a toá fachcon a ranna Gaelic, bí a gceonsach na Gaelic, agus cuteocht bí a lévah a chuútar héin sa chanach go héin sa chiad sin gach. Agus sé sin an dói a dhéh at an stú ha cho kutrach is cho príseo get nach na fachtan Gaelic ach son an fiction. Haast bí unla bí ach stocha go bhfuil féim ann primer cultúr na Gaelic. Mar a siimplín na leorichin ag Michael Newton sé goir sin uhamasach má a háanta. Bha mí an cuasichin a léisnar a bhaid ag olhaid nu Francis Xavier, agus jonsich mí. Agus sé fír cultúr a hán. Agus ha dúir mí sin speaking our language. Ha dúir mí an dhéhit a goir sin éile. Bei sin an dóibh acamsa agus bana clásichin Gaelic acam at díoch na searbha nas príseo a bhása sgascin ro ag an context. Chudí.
Na machchas a hiad de sin a rioch filantas. Is úsan an ha mi fadach an gohfuil dúna stat is cas go bhfuil ha cíol a falla bhain. Ha idir táiseachug, ha idir jonsach fachgil. Son nuair sin déle, Diana chéim agus cosán am í déine sin. Ok, ha éhín, ok, júnsich mi big an Gaelic ach ha rúteann a dhí son mar a thuústú ha dorsin na fosclug agus how
Féimi sin uller uver.
Jesus.
Féimi. Agus féimi sin uller Jo uver a bhí slí na Gaelic. sé rud goma an dóid do chut. sé rud goma neonnach a hawn agus dochan bí sin nar millionaires. Féimi sin Jo uver a ha nar krier an is minnig. Gása bé na skillach gan bh gan hokal nu a gas an rád goma agus darf. Ach féimi sin ceall a hokal. Ceall san bí do rut san bí an an súl na Gaelic. Agus féimi sin Jo rut rí se bhí ceall. Agus léise sin nam bheach, bí ar misneach stocha a lacach, bh am go am fas kar an lac agus na sláire is lachas na sláire ach chu bí hast acin tron thola.
True.
Féimi sin jo over. Dé an tuver a vakatse fer.
Oh well, sé san sa vritin vika ha mi héin bo hús. Mar sinné dún sich bí an canan am hé an dásoch bretinis. Agus na mé schon a vidal na stunje a sa vritin vik chanéel mar a heret Keltich is agad Celtic Studies. Chan sin akin. sé ddíach bretinis.
Sure.
Ba mis mé chin a mé son vi gansoch na sásinge. A mé son vi tuk sin dé an déh a hakin le kummeris agus alpenich. Smart.
I guess had mm.
A vísachan is mu chin oef. Ha a vi dich blian an. Oh ha fis. Ha fis. Oh a fis a chrístí. Rút ha mis muine chin ha gomain sinnach gas go an an awop a réiltoch. Ach bhil kuteoch an awop nua. Agus sé an charm mé riomh an awop nuach, fa mi fadach an gachtúras a chuinnig míle kutsekinn a awop nua. Fa mi fadach an groiad go mat dú leis an dúlachas, a go ma kutrum a raibh mar gom beag an cinniúk, an finne mar gom beag coas a vat is akad. Agus an nalope ha prut be konspejoch úsannen. An ddífar der géil awop nua agus géú na halope. Tí bhhaisiú héin an do bhhaisiúrute cin mar sin an ddífar aisiút nó haid go fas gur a chéile a chavéliad go fas sin ar is an há.
Sure, nam bheach cha jifer mór etter. Ar an alpa nuair chará ui ag go holadúne ar a gaig nó cúta na gaig a chatú reinna cron ora ítir. Ach ar an alpa, fa an chonog am gynno dúne awn a fa smeinthe gymburin yn gaig basain. Agus carsona ha o giri rut som bí mar sinna vi tacht. Ach ar an alpa nuair ma ha dúne koma díoch koma, oké, kers go leor. sé rut luch vor a haun do hunne a sin kerskliel. Na géel an alpa nuair. Ha cho intinach. Kimmer in minich gar. Gema Jonach. Gema Jonach agus nam bjacht hat de farachking go cean lácher ettere agus cean lácher achke ri jachttaí na skide agus muintir a vala agus lísigála chéin agus sé rut wafasach luchhór a hintse. Hat do rein at kron sem bí. Ure, itcher, agus van tjonagam. Agus menig van ha holle dunne mar. Agus kutjoch mar a hoorstu, bí het as menige Dave, had Dave in gemas. Hier hiestje weke holle dunne ko daher. Agus, rekker me wel gaan heel joch her. Dan is ik de hitcher. Ach, die er go intjenjoch, agus nu a weisach gunro uiaket er a jaarlik, va gira ho bla rust agus ho kutjacho. Va dunne ele blaas kutjacho. Hat toch hakke mi riev dunne an al op nuer go ba voer agus groemach. Lance ke you. Hat dirach hat jogesachke guri rut prisha. Rut prisha's nuach war.
I mean, I think we're taking it to a close there. So there's a few wee things to wrap up. I ran a poll with our audience. You guys can get to vote on this. So the question asked our audience, what is the first Gaelic word that made you wonder if your keyboard was lying to you? So is it och, ha, gema, or falcha?
My keyboard was lying. I'm not sure I actually understand the question.
So is it autocorrect? We think it was autocorrect and it was a Gaelic word.
Yeah. Or like when you actually wrote it out, you thought, no, that can't be it. It's like a pronunciation. That's what it's asking. So it's och, ha, gema, or falcha. They voted already. There's been quite a few votes came in for it. So you guys get to vote on this as well. You could clinch it.
Not sure. I never thought of it.
Right?
Maybe ha. That's a very common one. Ha instead of the.
Actually, nobody voted. Falcha was the winner.
Really? Well,
Yes.
there you go.
I think maybe because I'm a language nerd, for me, I can't think of Gaelic spelling. For me, Gaelic spelling makes so much sense
All right.
that I'm never confused by it. But I can understand that falsher might be for people who haven't learned the nitty gritties of how it works. It might actually be a very confusing word.
And it's customary now. We end with a few silly quickfire questions, Jason. Are you ready?
Bring it on.
Right. Number one, if a single Gaelic noun could be banned forever purely because you think it sounds funny, which one would it be?
Plumbish.
I'm not ready for these questions.
That's a good thing with quickfire. Right. So you're about to go on stage. Do you feel more nervous about pronouncing a cluster of 5 consonants or accidentally wearing a non-tartan kilt?
I might be worried about the kilt way more.
Consonants for me. Yeah.
Consonant, all right. All right. This one's more directed towards Jason. How many times a week do you accidentally say a Gaelic phrase to a non-Gaelic speaking American?
Constantly every day. Multiple
right.
times a day. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. Number 4. If Scottish Gaelic were a dance move, what would it be called?
Mashin.
There's,
Oroyali.
there's, there's been 2 of suggest. There's the Lanishan lean or the lingual lurch were 2. That's
The Lilician lean is quite nice.
That's a good one. And
any. Now that I've kind of given you any ones you could come up with yourself.
slenderization slide.
Oh, yes.
I like the Lanishan one best though. Yeah.
We're looking at
Yeah,
you now,
Lilician
Harsh.
lean
You've
is
got
a
it.
very good one. Yeah, can't top
Okay.
that.
You can't top that. All right. Okay, so our last quickfire. Do you believe that anyone who truly masters all of the Gaelic dialects is actually a witch or wizard?
All the dialects.
Yeah.
You're the most powerful wizard in the world for sure for that.
They definitely know the evil eye averting curse or spell that Frothend.
Yeah.
They definitely have things like that up their sleeve.
Aye. Yeah, all the dialects, that's that. But then, like, whoever masters all the English dialects is a
Yeah.
wizard.
Holy moly. Good luck
There's
with
a guy
that.
who can go from Cockney to Mississippi. I respect that.
Wow. Yeah.
At every stop along the way is just be even more impressive.
Aye, aye.
All right, so that brings us to an end. Jason, thank you so much. It's been fascinating. Great to have you on. And if people want to find you and reach out to you, where can they find you?
You can find me on YouTube, Gaelic with Jason, and then also my website, gaelicwithjason.com, where I have courses and audiobooks for the novel I've written. Lots of good stuff that'll really help you deepen your Gaelic and get deep into the culture too.
Gramak at the
fantastic.
Jason.
More on time, actually.
Oh, what a time, Jason. It's been great having you on. And well, we're taking a little break from recording, and when we're back, bounce us with us again. And for once, it's not language. We're going to be talking Studio Ghibli.
Cool.
Got
Ooh, so
Raina
that one.
Dennison, who's done academic papers on Studio Ghibli from University of Nottingham, I want to say. I've probably gotten that wrong. Apologies. And then after that, it is going to be language because we're talking about 1670 in the next show. That's a Polish comedy that we've been talking about quite a lot. So plenty to look forward to, and enjoy Ocon this weekend if you're watching this. We'll see you there. Oh, well, thank you very much, Jason, and thank you everyone for watching.
Come on.
Thank you, man.
Okay.